Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right. Hey, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. And I'm the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where I talk with CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs and companies and organizations like YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Axe Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And we're recording this live today. I'm going to be interviewing Bill Raymond. Bill is an expert in Agile. If you've heard that term before, or if you've heard the term Scrum or Toyota Manufacturing or Lean methodology or any of those related philosophies, Agile is a philosophy that has been taking the world by storm in the last 15 to 20 years or so. And it's not just for tech companies, but is a new approach, a new way of getting work done more efficiently. And it has applications in any kind of business. So Bill is really one of the foremost experts in that area. And I wanted to take some time to ask him about how that can work for different companies out there as well. So in this episode, titling it, What is Agile and How do we get here? We're going to talk a little bit about the history of Agile. And also we're going to talk about what types of questions you need to ask if your company is thinking about whether you should adopt it. But first, before we get into this interview, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, which I co-founded with my business partner, Dr. Jeremy Weiss. And our mission is to connect you to your best referral partners and customers. And we do that through a done-for-you podcast solution and content marketing. I believe if you have a business, you should have a podcast, period. It's one of the best things I've ever done, hands down, since I founded my business. It's like a Swiss Army knife. It's a tool that accomplishes so much at once. I highly recommend it. I'm a full-on evangelist for the medium, and you should all be doing it if you're listening to this. So if you want to learn more about how to do it, you can also go to rise25media.com and learn all about it. All right, so Bill, let's dive into, first let's talk about a little bit about the history of Agile, where it came from. And interestingly enough, it came down from a mountaintop. No, I mean literally, it came down from a mountaintop. This is such a funny story. A group of top leading engineers, I believe it was, about coming up on 20 years ago, literally went to a mountaintop and came up with this philosophy. So what is Agile, for those who don't know what it is, and how did they come up with it?
Yeah, it started in the software development area. And so these people that were at the mountaintop in Utah, they actually came up with a number of values that really kind of make up how they want to do software development. And the reason for why this even became a thing was because I'm a project manager. I come from the project management world. And for a very long time, I have been working in this with this concept of building project plans that kind of think about everything that you do from top to bottom, left to right. And when you think top to bottom, left to right, you have what's called a waterfall. And what these software developers were having a hard time with was, well, we have to sit here and wait for all these committees to make decisions before we can even start developing. And then when we do start developing, things change all the time. So we need to change that. We need to get started developing sooner and then be able to react to change. And so they came up with 4, if you will, guiding principles. One is managing individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And another is working software over comprehensive documentation.
And sorry, I want to interrupt you there, but I know there are 2 more, but some of these were pretty disruptive at the time. The idea of, putting these philosophies out there were really kind of disruptive to the way people have been doing it for a while, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel like if you sit down and talk to a software developer, you would hear the common issues, which is that, hey, I'm in a meeting and I don't need to be here. I should be able to, I should be developing, right? I no, you're asking me to document this thing, but it's not even done yet. So I should just be giving you the minimal amount of documentation. But a lot of times what happens is the software developers and engineers read this manifesto and obviously ran with it. It sparked some energy, and everyone said, how can we kind of live and breathe this idea? And that's kind of how that started. But as you said, from a management perspective, and I'm one of those managers, at first I was pretty unclear as to where this was going to go. It felt like I was going to lose a lot of control. And a lot of the people that I worked with, my clients, they would also say, well, this is taking far too much control out of my hands and putting it into the hands of the teams. And so, yeah, it was very controversial at the time. And sometimes when you're starting to implement Agile and you're trying to live and breathe these things, it's still controversial.
Yeah, right. And so I interrupted you, but you mentioned the first two principles. There are two more principles.
Yeah, the other is customer collaboration over contract negotiation and responding to change over following a plan. And I don't know if we need to go into each one of these individually, but the concept here is, look, we don't know when we're building software what it's ultimately going to look like. So what we should be doing is talking to customers more, iterating on small features and just trying it out before we try to design the whole thing, because it will change. Not develop all the documentation that anyone could possibly ever need when you're still going through this change. So, and also, really focus on the team collaboration as opposed to committees and these big teams of people that kind of make decisions for you, even when what they decide may not fit into the software product that you've written.
Right. And now, in terms of the history of Agile, it started in the technology and software realm, but, there are many other companies that have implemented this, which aren't software companies, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Or software companies with departments within them that do this as well. For example, Microsoft in their marketing group, they adopted Agile techniques, and they're doing, it's took them a while to adopt it. And now that, that's how they do their work, right? So I think what's interesting here is that you don't have to be in software development in order to adopt these ideas, these philosophies, these practices that software developers have put in place. They're actually useful for any business that you might be in.
Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I want to acknowledge Kimberly Lahodney is here, and also Scott Anderson. Scott, good to see you. Scott said he's very interested in Agile. So, and also, if you're listening to this on a recording, go connect with me on LinkedIn. Look me up, John Corcoran, and you'll know about any future live recordings like this that I do. So you can ask questions as we go along. But I also want to ask you, Bill, about what are some of the sorts of considerations that people who've heard about Agile should think about if they're thinking about adopting in their organization? What are some of the initial questions they should ask?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when the conversation gets started around Agile, the first thing people say is, oh, we're doing stand-up meetings? And, if you've never heard of a stand-up meeting, they're daily meetings. They last about 15 minutes, and they're and everyone sort of stands there and says, here's what I accomplished, here's what I'm doing today, here's what I'm doing tomorrow, and here's any blockers to the project.
And of course, everyone's thinking, oh, another meeting, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh no, please don't do that. And you're bringing in this person that's going to force us to do it. No, that's not the case. So Agile is about improving team flow. It's about improving how you get your work done. And it's about empowering teams to make decisions and make changes along the way. Because if something's not going well, the team should be able to pivot. And so a lot of what this is, that's the first thing people ask me is the meetings. But really what it's about is, how do you properly form a team? And then after you form those teams, what are the ways that we're going to enable them to improve? So what meetings are we going to kill and get rid of so that we can just have these stand-up meetings and not have 20 other status meetings? How do we think about what a status meeting is? How do we think about how we select work and get that into the backlog is what we call it, so that we can start working on it. So it's the early on stages of this is really thinking about how you're going to organize your team, not about what meetings you're gonna set up and put on people's calendar.
And we were talking about this before, and you were saying that there's some consultants and some experts in Agile who are very rigid in their implementation. They say you need to have all these different pieces in place. But you actually say that it's okay to have a hybrid model. It's okay to take certain pieces that work for your company, implement those, and it's okay to not implement others.
Yeah, I think every company that you go into has their own sets of acronyms. Every time I walk into a company, they start throwing off all these terms, and I'm going, I have no idea what the EVA project is, or an FBLA is, but there's all these terms, right? And if you go out and search for Agile philosophies, Agile processes, Agile methodologies, and you Google those, what you're going to get is a laundry list of all of these different approaches that different companies or organizations or groups have created. So the popular ones, for example, are Scrum and SAFe, which is a scaled Agile framework. All of these different approaches, you shouldn't think of them as, oh, we're adopting this one. What you should be thinking is, here's what we're trying to do. Here's culturally and organizationally what we can do, at least right now. And so what are some of these best practices from any of them that we can pick from? And then you'll probably even invent your own. So I'm a really big fan of not trying to, pigeonhole anyone into one particular framework or philosophy.
Right. And now another question, if I'm thinking about implementing this in my company, an obvious question is, how quickly can we make this happen? Because I'm sure, every company is thinking, well, we don't want to spend forever on this. So can we make it happen by next week? Right? How long does it take? How quickly can they get started?
And the funny thing is, usually when someone asks me that, they ask for a project plan. Here's the thing, is that this is going, you have to think of implementing Agile as organizational change. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to change your entire company, but it could have a significant impact on how you've organized the teams that are going to be adopting Agile. And so when you're thinking about this, you really have to think about this as something that's an initiative. It's going to go on forever. Like hopefully you don't.
It's a new way of doing things,
right? Yeah, hopefully you don't just say, "Oh, we did Scrum, now we're done." Right?
Right.
Like, we're constantly innovating, but at some point you want to get to that. You want to get to that sort of, if you will, peak that says, "Okay, we're kind of operating really well now." And I think that what that will be is you take your baby steps, you treat it like it's an Agile project, you identify the things that you can do right away. Maybe it is stand-up meetings. Maybe it is a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You select the things that you know aren't going to cause a whole lot of, I won't call it damage to the team while you're figuring it all out. So that piece, that sort of forming some basic concepts, usually takes in around 3 months. That piece where you're kind of doing it and actively working in Agile and even using tools, that's something that we talked about before, John, and might be a whole other conversation, is that you still need tools to do your work and plan work. But when you think about that, that's usually 9 to 12 months before you're there, before you've said, we are now functioning in a Agile way, and we've reorganized our teams, maybe even changed people's titles in order to do that. That's, so we're talking about 3 months to kind of kickstart it, and then 9 to 12 months before you're living it.
Got it. We got a couple of questions that have come in here. So first of all, Dave Berlin, great to see you. He's the city leader at Bunker Labs, and he's based in Las Vegas. And good to see you, Dave. Good friend. Scott Anderson's still here. And Kimberly Lahadny had a question. She asked, how would you see this impacting real estate and media companies?
Yeah, so I think actually media company. So what's interesting with media companies in specifically is that they actually have. You almost can think of these individuals as kind of coming up with some big ideas, right, and then implementing them. And who implements them? They're software developers. They're designers. They're people that have to work together on a regular basis. You can almost think of that as like a software development team. And so the way that you kind of define how this changes is what you're trying to do really when you're doing agile is get rid of the old stuff that's slowing things down so you can react faster. And I don't think we've ever seen this happen more during this time. I just talked to a person who saw this COVID thing happen, and he worked with a software developer and an author and a designer to put together a book around working from home because he's always worked from home, but he never had the time. Those teams worked together using agile tools, and they released it in a month. And his first sales were about $100,000. And
Wow.
so this is how it's changing, is that you can react a lot faster. I don't know the real estate industry well enough to say how it could affect them, but I'm sure there's some opportunity.
Yeah, and probably ways that teams can maybe work together because if they're if it's the project is selling a home or selling an apartment building or selling a commercial building or something like that, maybe there's a series of tasks that need to be done. There are people that need to work together, so maybe it's just an approach to help them with how to organize it and how to get all the work done. So thank you for that question. So Bill also wanted to ask about, you kind of addressed the issue of how long it would take. Another one is, how teams are put together, particularly in a larger organization. It might be that they have the whole marketing team is here and the whole software development team is here and the customer service team is here. And really, that might mean that you need to make some changes. So talk a little bit about how that affects things.
Yeah, so let's just pretend for a minute that you're in the software development team, John, and you're managing a team of software developers that just adopted Agile, and you're using some of the just basic concepts, such as a product owner that's defining what needs to, sort of the roadmap for the work and what the priorities are, and you're running things in sprints. And so every time you have a 2-week sprint of work that you're doing, it's kind of locked in. The team decided what work that they can do based on the amount of staff they have and the sizing of the work. So you might be a manager too, but the team is the ones that decided that along with the product owner. Now here I am sitting in marketing, and I didn't adopt Agile. Okay, I'm just trying to get work done. Maybe I have a project plan or something that I've developed. Well, if I'm not working in concert with your Agile process, then there's a good chance that my work's not going to get fit into that backlog of work, and we'll have different concepts of whose work is really priority. If we had reorganized ourselves so that a marketing team member, myself, is on the development team, and we're all just kind of a team working on this project, and my priorities are your priorities, then things are going to work a lot more smoothly. And we're not going to say, oh, Agile doesn't work because the software developers are over there doing Agile. Well, actually, no, we should all be doing it together as a team.
That's great. And then Dave Berlin asked an interesting question. Let me find it here. He said, I just learned about Agile, so this is perfect timing, he said, which is great for Dave. And he said, how's it compared to Traction? Traction, of course, by Gino Wickman. I've got his most recent book here, Entrepreneurial Leap, which is a great book. I would highly recommend it to anyone who's considering, especially in the current times we're in, where a lot of people are maybe thinking about starting a business because maybe they got laid off. But Traction, he's the founder of also the EOS operating system. So I don't know if you're familiar with all that, but can you compare the two if you're to the extent you're familiar with both?
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with Traction. So if you could give me a little insight.
Yeah, it's called the entrepreneurial operating system, and it's a way of, and I'm going to probably butcher the description of it, but it was designed from his own personal experience of going in. He was involved in running a family business, and basically in a lot of closely held and private, especially family businesses, there's certain people that are in the wrong roles. So it's about classifying where you should be, what role you should be playing, allowing that person to transition into that role that they're naturally good at, that they get energy from, that they enjoy doing, and then bringing in other people who then will perform different functions. Like, for example, if you're a creative type and you're stuck doing the bookkeeping, not a good fit, right? So that should be switched around. So I think that was what Dave was asking about that. So
yeah,
does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, and thanks for the question, Dave. I think that these are very complementary from what I've just heard. Here's the thing, actually, is that when we initially go through, and I do say this is organizational change. Agile is. It's not just doing Agile. You're going to have to reorg, and so there's going to be people on your team that always wanted. There's software developers that I talk to all the time. Again, it doesn't have to be for software development, but they're always saying, I became a manager because I wanted more money and I wanted more responsibility, but I don't like managing. If you take this sort of organizational structure around Agile, then we would get you into that role and get someone that really loves managing people in that role. There are some managers that really like their control. I'm being one of them. I love my control. But what happens is, I can't be a master of everything. And what I think I'm pretty good at is thinking long-term about things, like where is the market going, and thinking a bit more strategically. So maybe my role is no longer that of a people manager, but my role becomes that of a product owner or a business owner that can really think about where we're going to go directionally. And so there are going to be people when you're implementing Agile that just hold on really tight and say, I like what I'm doing. And maybe that is great. Maybe that works. But there are times when people just don't want to go on for the ride. And that can certainly be a challenge. But I think that this question around traction and finding the right roles for people, this is so important if you're going to adopt Agile. Otherwise, all you're doing is you're gonna just go right back to the old way you were doing things when you were actually trying to make change to improve your organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thank you for drawing that distinction on the fly. So that's the fun of live questions. So thanks everyone for all the great questions. Dave, Kimberly, Scott, everyone who was here. And Bill, of course, thank you so much for taking the time to enlighten all of us about what Agile is. It's an idea that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, but maybe don't know all the details around it. So where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, if you're on LinkedIn right now, just look for Bill Raymond and you'll see my my bald head up there.
And the name of the company?
Cambermast, Cambermast, Cambermast.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, John. Nice talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.